Human nature does not change. We always have a propensity to, if you like, do the wrong thing in some areas of our lives, every one of us, and a propensity to try and be noble and to lift ourselves in another part. What doesn't change, though, is our underlying nature. And it seems to me to be unbelievably naive to attempt to deny that. History is simply not with you. But we discount history. And there seems to be a major attempt to rewrite history in American education as well. How has America lost grip on real history?
Oh, yeah. So that's exactly right. So we believe human nature is fixed and that the government's role is to create processes and incentives and limitations so as to guide this flawed human nature towards the best outcomes. So we're primarily concerned with process. We're primarily concerned with the how we solve problems. This is extremely important as being a conservative. The left does believe that human nature can be, like you said, legislated into perfection. And this causes them to have sort of a utopian ideal and take extreme action when they see problems. I view that as totally unsustainable, and I think that's borne out in history, how it's totally unsustainable and how it leads. And they're not concerned with second, third order consequences or anything of the sort. And I think this is a very problematic way of problem solving. So that's sort of the basis of how we see these things, and this is how it's playing out right now. Let me just give an example in the conversation about systemic racism. So there's this belief on the left that there's systemic racism. The conservatives turn around and say, okay, well, where is it? That means something to me. That means my institutions are systemically racist, that there's some kind of law or rule or something wrong with the process, which is actually going against our notions of neutrality and equality under the law. So, okay, let's find those because we don't like that. We had a whole civil rights movement to stop that. You know, we fought wars because of this simple notion of equality. And but then they say, well, it's not exactly in the institutions. It's like, you know, it's within you. You can't really see it. It's, you know, it's your internal bias. It's your implicit bias. It's all this, you know, you're racist, but you don't know it. You know, and we're like, wait a second. Okay, hold on. And so you can never find it, right? You're always chasing ghosts. And then they make the argument, well, because you can't find it, you can't see it, but trust us, it exists. So we have to reform the institutions to be unequal in order to create equality. And this is where it goes off the rails. And this is, as I've noticed, I think we're exporting that notion a little bit. Granted, it was exported into the United States from Europe. Okay, so I'm not going to take total blame for America exporting it now, because this has roots in Germany and Marxism as well. So, you know, this goes back to a long history. Well, it has roots in the French Revolution, as you just mentioned, right? This notion that you can start from ground zero. Not take into account any of the collective knowledge that we've obtained over thousands of years. It's hard to explain what that collective knowledge is, but it's formed in our cultures and traditions and relationships. And they don't believe in that anymore. They believe in the cult of reason in the French Revolution, and that they can reason their way to perfection right away. And it doesn't end well. It ends in the French Terror, or in our case here in the United States, it ends in Chaz, which is, you know, what you saw in Seattle, where these people were basically acting as French revolutionaries, believing that they can start anew in their own little utopia. And it always ends in disaster, just like it did in Chaz. I don't know if you're familiar with Chaz, but that's a whole other story. They basically created an autonomous zone in the middle of Seattle. And they look like a bunch of clowns. And it's easy to make fun of them, but it is dangerous. It is dangerous to see this sort of ideology welling up. And there's nothing on the other side of that revolution except terror. And I think that's what we have to show people and demonstrate to people, and show them how even when you just tinker with these basic foundations of what equality means, justice means, what law means, all of these, when you just even start to mess with them, it does lead to this, because once you've opened Pandora's box, you can't put these things back in.
Seems to me that one of the deepest ironies and most troubling aspects of Chaz and other attempts to defund police and what have you is that if you really look at where the violence is happening and you really look for where people need help, you'll often find, as I understand it, the most common calls for help from the police come from black women in difficult communities wanting protection from violence in their own local circumstances. How does defunding, declawing, attacking police help them?
Yeah, it's disastrous on many fronts. So first of all, this is sort of the white liberal Marxist types calling for the defund the police, and of course like the extremists in the Black Lives Matter community calling for that too. But I think something like 60 to 80% of probably closer to 80% of black people polled will say, of course we don't want to defund the police. That's nonsense. I saw Al Sharpton recently saying, hey, that's great for white liberals to say, but that's not what our communities need. When they've gone too far left for Al Sharpton, that's a sign that this movement is based in something much darker and much deeper than just, and has almost no association with any kind of civil rights. It's purely revolutionary in its nature, and they mean defund the police. I mean, these radicals go out there, they mean it. They are not satisfied with moving some funding around. They're not satisfied with cutting hours. They mean it. They mean abolish it. These are pure anarchists. These are anarcho-fascist communists, as I like to call them, and that's not a contradiction. They engage in fascist tactics. They want anarchy in order to create crisis, to justify the revolution, to create communism. This is what they want. So it's more of a pathway than it is a particular label in time. But that is their ideology. The other reason it's problematic, so set those crazy white liberal Marxists aside, and they usually are crazy white liberal Marxists, Antifa and those types. Set them aside, though, and then that language, though, of defund the police and systemic racism within the police, it does manifest into really problematic behavior outside of those circles, just whether in criminal circles or just in some of these minority communities. And you see that when our cops are being assassinated on the streets. So a young mother shot in the face, she's a cop, 31 years old in Los Angeles, and her partner, I think 24-year-old man, shot in the face. Why? Because somebody tried to go up and assassinate them. So this guy who did it believes in this rhetoric. I don't think he's a Marxist. I don't think he's any idea what Marxism even means. But he does hear the rhetoric, and he does hear that he's being hunted down by cops. So this is where I call out my Democrat colleagues. They're saying this kind of thing. They're saying, hey, you're systemically oppressed. There's systemic racism in the police force. This is playing with fire. These are dangerous terms. If something is truly systemic, it means you have to fight it. That's what it means. It means you have to abolish it or fight it, because that's what it would mean to me. If you tell me I'm systemically oppressed, truly, then you've disempowered me. And the only way for me to gain back my power is to fight you. And so don't be surprised when people are doing this kind of thing. So I call out the other side, who you cannot say in the same breath, you're being systemically oppressed, but also looting and rioting is bad. I'm sorry, but it doesn't work that way. Because once you've told somebody and convinced them of their oppression, you better expect them to fight. Hell, that is the American way after all. But the problem is it's based on an untruth. The police are not hunting anybody. This is just not true. And we could go into the statistics behind it all day long. It's not persuasive to people who already believe it, because narratives and storytelling matters quite a bit. And the leaders who do know better need to be more responsible with how they talk about this, because they're getting people killed.